Welcome to Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched, first-person simulation of history's most interesting people. I am your host, Calvin. While we've added some creative storytelling, our goal is to inspire your own study of these fascinating lives. Now, let's meet our guest. For those who may somehow not know who you are, who are you?
I am Harry Houdini, though many know me as the Handcuff King, or the man who could escape from anything, be it a jail cell, a water-filled milk can, or even a straitjacket while hanging upside down over a busy street. I've spent my life chasing the impossible and proving that with enough grit and logic, there's no lock that can truly hold a person back.
When and where were you born?
Well, if you had asked me during my stage days, I would have told you Appleton, Wisconsin. I loved that town so much I claimed it as my birthplace for years. But the truth is a bit more international. I was born on March 24, 1874, in Budapest, Hungary. My family moved to the United States when I was just a little fellow, eventually settling in that charming town of Appleton.
What was your given name at birth?
I entered this world as Eric Weiss. It's a fine name, but not quite one that leaps off a theater playbill. Wouldn't you agree?
Is there a story behind your birth name?
My parents, Rabbi Meir Samuel Weiss and my dear mother Cecilia, gave me that name. As I grew up and started my journey into magic, Eric became Airy, which eventually evolved into the more American-sounding Harry. As for Houdini, I took that from my great idol, the French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. I read his biography as a teenager and was so inspired that I added an I to his name, thinking it meant like Houdin.
What was your hometown like growing up?
Appleton was a dream to me. I used to imagine it even when I was far away. It was a place of simple joys, parents chatting, the feeling of home. But things took a turn when my father lost his job at the synagogue. We moved to Milwaukee, and let me tell you, life became much harder. We were quite poor, and those early days were a real scramble for survival.
What was your family life like?
We were a big, bustling family. I had 5 brothers and a sister. It was a life of struggle, but also of deep devotion. I was incredibly close to my mother, Cecilia. She was the light of my life. My father was a man of great faith, a rabbi, and while he struggled to provide financially, he instilled in me a sense of pride and discipline.
What kind of kid were you?
Oh, I was a restless one. I was always moving, always curious. By the time I was 9, I was performing a trapeze act as Eric, the Prince of the Air. I even ran away from home at 12, hopping a freight car just to see what was out there. I was a kid who couldn't stay still. I wanted to see the world, and I wanted the world to see me.
What were your biggest fears growing up?
My chief task in life was always to conquer fear. Growing up in poverty, the fear of failing my family was a heavy weight. But physically, I feared panic. In my line of work, panic is the real killer. I spent hours in tortuous self-training, learning to control my breathing and my mind so that when I was locked in a dark box underwater, fear wouldn't be the thing that held the key.
What did you dream of becoming as a child?
I dreamed of being a world-class performer. Whether it was the trapeze or the cards, I wanted to captivate people. I wanted to be someone who could do things that made people's jaws drop and their hearts race.
What were some of your favorite activities in school?
To be honest, Calvin, I didn't have much of a formal education. Being from a poor immigrant family, I was out working more than I was in a classroom. But I was an athlete. I loved anything that tested my body, running, swimming, and especially developing the dexterity in my hands.
What was your first job?
I was a jack of all trades. I sold newspapers, shined shoes, worked as a messenger, and even spent time as a necktie cutter and a photography assistant. Anything to bring a few extra coins home to my mother.
Was there a moment where you realized you were different from everyone else?
It was when I realized that most people look at a lock and see a barrier, but I looked at a lock and saw a puzzle. While other boys were playing games, I was obsessed with how things worked, how to pick a mechanism, how to use leverage. I realized I had a level of focus and physical control that others simply didn't possess.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
It was the day I decided to stop focusing just on card tricks and start focusing on escapes. I was performing at a dime museum in 19th century Minnesota when I met a manager named Martin Beck. He saw me doing a handcuff act and told me, "Harry, drop the magic, keep the escapes." That one piece of advice changed me from a struggling magician into a global sensation.
What was your biggest break?
Meeting Martin Beck in 1899 was definitely it. He booked me on the Orpheum vaudeville circuit, and suddenly I wasn't just playing for pennies in museums, I was performing in the top houses in the country. Within a year, I was touring Europe and becoming the handcuff king.
What were your biggest struggles before success?
The grinding poverty, as they say. There were times my wife Bess and I were traveling with circuses and carnivals, barely making enough to eat. I even considered quitting show business at one point and opening a magic school just to have a steady income. It was a long 6-year haul before that big break came.
Did you ever consider quitting?
Oh, absolutely. In 1898, I was so frustrated that I actually mailed out a catalog for Harry Houdini's School of Magic. I thought my time on the stage might be over. But luckily, I stuck it out for one more year, and that's when everything turned around.
Were there any specific daily habits or routines that you feel are essential to your success?
Practice, practice, and more practice. I would spend hours submerged in my own bathtub, training myself to hold my breath for minutes at a time. I also practiced sleight of hand constantly. Even when I was talking to people, my fingers were moving, working with cards or coins. And I allowed my brother Leopold, who was an X-ray specialist, to X-ray me frequently, just so I could understand my own anatomy better.
What job would you have had if fame never happened?
I might have been an aviator or a locksmith. I actually became the first man to fly a powered aircraft in Australia. I loved the mechanics of things. But if I weren't on stage, I think I would have been a researcher or an investigator. I have a natural obsession with finding the truth behind a mystery.
What was your life like before fame?
It was a constant hustle. It was metamorphosis, the trick where Bess and I would trade places in a trunk, performed for tiny crowds. It was living in boarding houses and traveling on freight trains. It was lean, but it made me tough.
How did relationships change after success?
Success can be a double-edged sword. While it allowed me to take care of my mother, which was my greatest joy, it also brought out rivalries. Even within my own family, there was friction, like the fallout with my brothers Nathan and Leopold. But my relationship with my wife, Bess, remained my anchor. We were a team from the start.
Did fame bring happiness?
It brought the ability to provide, which was a form of happiness, but it also brought a restless need to keep, quote, upping the stakes. I was always looking over my shoulder at copycats. I wouldn't say it brought a quiet peace, but it certainly brought excitement.
What was the downside of becoming famous?
The copycats and the doubters. I had to spend so much energy defending my name and proving I wasn't a fraud. I even had to win a lawsuit in Germany against a newspaper that called my acts fake. Fame means you're always under a microscope.
What misconceptions do people have about you?
People thought I had supernatural powers. They thought I could dematerialize or pass through walls. But I always told them, it's intelligence, reason, and meticulous preparation. There was nothing magical about it, just hard work and a very strong stomach.
What was your darkest moment?
Losing my mother in 1913. That broke my heart in a way no jail cell ever could. It actually drove me toward my later work of investigating spiritualism. I wanted so badly to speak to her again, but all I found were charlatans trying to trick grieving people.
What past regrets did you carry that you spoke about?
I regretted not being able to find a genuine way to communicate with those who have passed. I spent years debunking fakes, hoping to find just one person who was real, but I never did.
What's something people misunderstood about your life?
People thought my crusade against mediums was an attack on religion or spiritualism itself. It wasn't. I just hated seeing people get swindled. I was a rationalist, but I was a rationalist with a very open heart.
Tell me about a time when everything went wrong and how did you handle it?
There was a stunt where I was buried alive, just me in the dirt. I nearly didn't make it. I had to claw my way to the surface, and I emerged in a state of near breakdown. How did I handle it? I took a breath, I analyzed what went wrong, and then I went back to work. You can't let a close-up with death stop the show.
Did fame and fortune change your life?
It changed my surroundings, certainly. I went from a boarding house to being the highest paid performer in vaudeville. But at my core, I was still the same Airy who wanted to prove he could beat any lock. My motto remained, and this too shall pass.
Who had the biggest influence on your life?
Aside from my mother, it was Robert Houdin, the man I named myself after. His biography was my Bible when I was starting out. He showed me that magic could be an art form of the highest order.
What was life like in your final years?
Busy. I was testifying before Congress to regulate fortune tellers and mediums. I was touring, exposing frauds, and still performing my Chinese water torture cell escape. I was 52, but I felt like I had the energy of a man half my age.
What were you working on in your career before you passed away?
I was at the height of my crusade against the occult. I had just published my book, A Magician Among the Spirits, and I was constantly on the road, challenging anyone to prove they had real psychic powers.
When and where and how did you pass away, and how old were you?
It happened on Halloween night, 1926, in Detroit. I was only 52. It was quite a shock. A student in Montreal had asked if I could withstand any blow to the stomach. Before I could properly brace myself, he struck me several times. It resulted in a ruptured appendix and peritonitis. I tried to keep performing, the show must go on after all, but I finally succumbed.
What's a random fact about you most people have never heard?
I was a massive collector. I had rare scrapbooks, posters, and all sorts of locking devices. Also, my favorite song was Old Lang Syne. A bit sentimental for a handcuff king, isn't it?
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you?
Oh, there's a story that I once made the bells of the Kremlin ring just by lifting my hand while I was in Russia. It's completely implausible, but people loved to believe I had those kinds of powers.
What was your most unique habit?
I used to let my brother x-ray me all the time to see how my bones and organs were doing. It was the early days of x-rays, so we didn't know the risks, but I was fascinated by the science of it.
What was your favorite food?
I always had a soft spot for my mother's cooking, of course, but generally I kept a very strict athletic diet to stay in shape for my escapes.
What's your funniest behind-the-scenes moment?
Once, in Russia, I requested to be locked naked in a freezing prison van used to transport prisoners to Siberia. The guards were so sure I was stuck, but I was out in 45 minutes. The looks on their faces when they saw me standing there, perfectly free, were absolutely priceless.
What was the most outlandish purchase you made?
I spent a lot of money on my collection of magic history and locking devices. I also bought an airplane back when they were still quite the novelty.
What advice would you give people chasing success?
My advice is simple. Prepare. Master your craft so thoroughly that fear has no room to breathe. And remember, the greatest lock you will ever have to pick is the one in your own mind.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you've shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Only that it has been a joy to step back into the spotlight for a moment. Life is the greatest mystery of all, and I hope my story inspires you to look at the world with a bit more wonder and a lot less fear. Thank you for having me, Calvin. It's been a real escape from the usual routine.
That was the legendary Harry Houdini, sharing his journey from a young immigrant in Wisconsin to the world's most famous escape artist. We covered everything from his early trapeze days to his ultimate crusade for the truth. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Harry. And that wraps up another conversation from beyond the grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, legends may die, but their stories never do. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod,